Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Today's video is on the Battle of the Atlantic. More specifically, it's about the convoying that happens in the Atlantic. This is a part of the game that is, it's a little complicated, right? It's much more complicated than the other games that you might have played. And I see a lot of people either doing it wrong or asking a lot of questions online, asking of me or on forums and stuff like that. So I'm going to go over a lot of those rules and talk about some of the nations involved. Talk a little bit about strategy on how to do it and everything. Just a little brief thing on the history. Like it was a fascinating history. It was the longest continuous battle of the Second World War. It went right from the 1939 all the way to 1945. Mostly what it was trying to starve the United Kingdom, the islands of Great Britain, there out of supplies, right? Kind of like when you surround a castle and you just wait for the food to run out, and then the people inside the castle have to surrender, right? That's basically what they were trying to do, but a lot of effort was put in on both sides, and the Allies did eventually come out on top of that. But it was there was a lot of ships sank and a lot of lives lost in the Battle of the Atlantic. Was 700 and something submarines lost, and over 3,500 merchant ships from the Allies were lost, and hundreds of warships were lost by them. The Italians lost a few submarines as well, but I think they only committed up to maybe 32 submarines, and they lost more than half of them anyway. About the same numbers of loss as the Germans had, like in a percentage, but. Anyway, it started off pretty good for the Germans, and the Allies had to catch up. And then once they caught up, then it didn't go so well for the Germans. And then the Germans would adapt, right? And they kind of stayed a little bit ahead, until eventually it got to the point where, when America was entering the war, then there was a lot more warships and a lot more planes and everything in the Atlantic, and Germany was just overwhelmed by that point. The technology had come to the point, and the distance that the planes could fly. Once they had a plane that could cover the air gap in the middle. Like here, let me just show you over here. This would have been an air gap, this convoy line right here. So right in the middle here, the patrolling planes couldn't reach from either side, but once they developed a medium bomber that could fly out this far, then that closed the air gap, and that was about it for the Germans. Like it went downhill pretty fast after that. But before that, they actually called it the happy time. That's how well they were doing up there in sinking ships. There were major losses for the Allies and hardly any losses for the Germans, and it was a happy time for them, I guess, if you consider sinking ships like that happy. Anyway, in regards to this game, Global War 1936 to 1945, they really do a good job in this game of recreating that battle in the Atlantic. When you compare it to the one game that we compare this game to more than anything is Global 40, because they're similar type games played with miniatures, mostly the same miniatures actually, but that's the only game that even comes close to this one. And with the Global 40 game from Axis and Allies, it really isn't a battle in the Atlantic. There's nothing like a battle in the Atlantic. Convoying, of course, is extremely simple in that, and so but even in the Atlantic itself, you look at the opening setup here. Let me just take you around to the other side over there. In the opening setup in Global 40, you're doing a bad job for the Germans if on the first turn of the game you haven't wiped out every British boat here except for a destroyer and a transport, right? So then that's it, that could be it for the rest of the game. No British boats in the Atlantic, or maybe there's one or two over in Canada here. And like then there's seasonal 91, which has some interesting stuff, and eventually the Americans make it across, if they even bother with the Atlantic. Like they might go for the Pacific. It's pretty gamey that way, right? But there's nothing historical about it. Like the Royal Navy was by far the greatest navy the world had ever seen. When the Second World War started, there's no way that the Germans could have wiped them out before it even started. Basically, before the Germans or before the British could even do anything. Like there's just no way that the Royal Navy was much larger than that. And this game recreates that. Like in here, there's no way. You look at the amount of German boats and the amount of German planes. Now this is pre-war. This is 1936, but even when you get to the war, there's no way that the Germans are going to be able to wipe out the British unless they take all their boats and they go somewhere else. And they could do that, but I mean that's a choice that they would make, right? Like choosing to leave your island unprotected. Good job, boys. Anyway, so to begin with, it's already better. But then they got these convoy lines, like this one here. This is a Russian convoy line, and this one isn't worth anything. But what it does do is it's if that line is covered and the Russians are at war by anything, any kind of surf or any kind of warship that can convoy it, then the Russians don't get any money. But if it's not covered, then the Russians can get a bonus of 2 IPP for that. But again, that's up to the Americans too, because the Americans, for no reason whatsoever, can deny that. It's not the money that comes from them. They could just say, you know what, I'm not letting the Russians have that $2 this time, because mostly that's where they were getting their Lend-Lease from is from America. And so if America says you're not getting it, then you're not getting it, right? Like you would probably want them to get that if they were fighting against the Germans. But late in the game, though, when it comes down to who's going to win or who's going to lose the game, that's when the Americans might want to start denying that. Now here, this one is a British convoy line, and you can convoy up to 5 IPP off there. Here's another British one for 6. I just noticed today when I was getting ready to make this video that there's no multiple convoy lines anymore. Like there used to be lines where it was either British or French or, and it's not. There's only one nation on each convoy line now. Like even that one in the Mediterranean there used to be French and British. Now it's just British. That one down there is just FEC. That used to be multiple nations down there. So that's a change in this game. But anyway, just the way the game plays out, it plays out like the war did. Like the Germans can get the upper hand in convoy raiding if they put some effort into it, and then the Allies can take over late in the war, just because of the sheer number of boats that they have and the fewer places it comes from for the Germans to hide. Like in the beginning, they truly are hunting, and then they are the hunted by the end of the game. If the game is played properly, like if one side's just throttling the other side, then maybe that doesn't happen. But in a game that's fairly even, and I find this game fairly even, until late in the game, you might see one nation or the other take over. Like I've seen Germany become a beast before, and I've seen them almost defeated before. So like that doesn't normally happen though. I've seen Russia definitely defeated before. But anyway, like the game is pretty good that way. But yeah, the Battle of the Atlantic plays out just about the way it's supposed to play out. I don't know, like just the way it was designed, right? It just as a game, it just plays out like the war did. And it's really fascinating. Like this part of the game is let's walk around to the other side again. This part of the game is it's a game in itself, right? Like there's so much involved in the battle in the Atlantic, so many rules involved, and so much effort and resources put into it. Like you could have a board game with just the Atlantic in it, with these rules and everything, these convoy lines, and like just the stuff basically that you see on the camera there. You could have a board game with just that in it, and it would be a pretty good board game, right? But you know, it takes some practice though. Like I've played both sides of this before. The convoy rules that they affect everybody in the game, right? They all use them the same way. But really, what they affect is the Germans and the British, right? Because that's mostly the nations that are convoyed and convoying in the game. And so I've played both of those nations before, and when I first started, I didn't really get it too much. The first time I played the Germans, I only convoyed a couple of times. I was mostly playing with tanks and stuff, you know what I mean? Attacking Paris and attacking Russia, and I just forget to move my subs and things like that. And then again with the British, I wasn't really, like I was playing against players that hadn't played the game much either, so they weren't great as a German player, and so as a British player, I didn't put much stock into stopping the convoying and stuff like that. But as we get to be better players, then this part of the game starts to be incorporated into our game. You know, like it's such a difficult game to learn, to grasp all of it. I mean, you can learn to play it, you can learn the rules pretty easily, but to get good at it, it takes a lot longer. And that's the good thing about this game. So, you know, like it's one thing to learn how to move your tanks around and learn how to blitz and learn how to do all the things that you do in this game. It's quite another to do all those things and prosecute the Battle of the Atlantic at the same time, because like I said, it's a game in itself. There's a lot involved in this, and you'll see that from this video. Anyway, we're going to go through some things. We're also, I'm going to go through the rules, and we're going to go through some of the reference sheets and see how they affect it. So let's get to it, shall we? So the rules that revolve around convoy raiding, they start in the second phase, combat movement phase. So what they are is, like, there's a few different things that you need to know. So here, let's just take a plane here. Now, we'll put this plane down. There's a thing called Maritime Air Patrol. So what Maritime Air Patrol is your plane is out there looking for subs. In this game, your subs see your planes are the only thing that see subs. Destroyers can detect subs and negate their first strike capability, but you can't just go and hunt them using a destroyer. The only way you can hunt a sub is with a plane that's on Maritime Air Patrol. It used to be called Combat Air Patrol, so if you're watching this video and you played version 2 before, Maritime Air Patrol and Combat Air Patrol are the same things. In fact, I still have the cap chips. I don't have any Maritime Air Patrol chips. So you can use a plane and you can go one space away, right? Like you could go here with this plane here, so that's one space away. So this convoy line is covered right here. Now I probably wouldn't do that with this one, right? Like I would probably would rather put them over here, right, and come out here. And so I can only go one space. The reason you can only go one space is that he's not flying in a continuous line somewhere, right? He's not going from point A to point B. What he's doing is he's on a search pattern. He's searching that C zone. So he's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That's how he's spending his fuel, and that's why he doesn't get a range of 4. So he's only got a range of 1. He can only go 1 out there, and then you can leave him out there if you want. So then if a sub tries to go through that territory, here, let's just grab a German sub here. If a sub tries to go through this territory, then you would attack him, right? Or if a sub tried to convoy the line in this territory, then you could convoy him. So you can leave him out there if you want, or on your non-combat move, you can take him off Combat Air Patrol. You can only go one space again though. So in other words, like if I was to do that, like let's say I was to go out here and then the Germans took out the territories that are bordering this one, and this is a difficult one. Like let's say this was British here and this guy went on Combat Air Patrol, and then the British took that, or sorry, the Germans took that territory there, then I don't have a place to land, even though I wasn't going to land this turn. If I don't have a place to land then I lose that plane. That plane splashes into the sea. I always have to be one space away from where I can land, whether that's on the land or whether that's on a carrier. You have to be at least one space away from the land at all times when you're on maritime air patrol. So there's that kind of movement. There's when you're doing carrier base here. Let me just grab a carrier here. So there's two types of carriers. There's the little carrier, and there's also the big carrier. And there's three types, I guess you could say. There's the heavy carrier, but the heavy carrier works the same way. So the concept is the same. You can only go one space away. So if the sub was here, then you could fly the plane over only one space. You couldn't, like this guy could go, you couldn't go from here, you couldn't go 1, 2, and then fly this here. That's going 3 spaces. In total, with the carrier movement, you can only go one. So you could fly your plane over as one, or you could move the whole thing over, that's one. And your planes that are on carriers, your carrier-based aircraft, are always considered to be on maritime air patrol. So this guy couldn't just go through this zone here like that, because these planes would have saw him. Planes don't just sit on the decks of carriers. You know, when a carrier is in the water, you can bet that there's planes up flying around, unless the weather's terrible, right? But they'd be up flying around watching, you know, a certain range away from the carrier, make sure that there was no threats around it, right? So they're always on maritime air patrol. But anyway, that's how they can also go one space away. But one change that's been made in version 3 compared to version 2, let's say you went over here with the planes and the carrier, and then the German guy hits you. Well, then your carrier is damaged, right? Now you've got no place to land because you can't land on a damaged carrier. That's a change from the rules. It was kind of a quirk in the rules that you could do that before. Sorry, I dropped something. That you could land on a damaged carrier. But now the rules have been changed in version 3, so you can't land on that damaged carrier. So these guys are going to be gone after that, right? After this engagement is over, after these guys probably shoot the sub, then they're going to be dead at the end of when your non-combat movement comes along. Unless, you know, like you could fly this plane over to here, and then one of them could survive, right? Because he can go one space away, right? So you'd be able to do that for sure. But I think you understand that concept, though. Like you have to be one space away from your landing spot when you're on maritime air patrol, right? Anyway, so that's carrier-based aircraft. Now, they've also thrown another thing in this year where you could also use destroyers, only destroyers, not any kind of boats. So you could pair destroyers 1-to-1. Now you can go up to the full range of a destroyer. Like let's take this destroyer down here. He could go 1, 2, 3, and your plane could come in here. So that's 1-to-1, right? So then I get a shot with the plane and I get a shot with the destroyer, and then this guy can either shoot back or leave, you know, or sink or dive. I mean, like if I missed him, he could dive. Sorry, I was thinking. Wait a minute. Yes. Yeah, so he if he dies, then he gets a shot back, and of course I'll probably, like, they can't hit planes, so I would obviously take the loss on this because I wouldn't want to lose my carrier here. Otherwise, I'd be losing my aircraft as well, right? So you can pair 1-to-1 with destroyers. If I was to bring all 3 of these planes in like that, well, then I could bring this destroyer in as well, and I could bring this destroyer in as well. So there you go, pairing them 1-to-1 with destroyers. But that's the only thing you can pair them with is a destroyer. You can't pair them with any other boat or any other unit on the board, just the plane on maritime air patrol. And I think that's just about it as far as hunting the subs. Okay, that's it. Okay, I knew I was forgetting something. So I showed you the planes. It could be a fighter, it could be a tactical bomber, it could be a medium bomber. They can all go on maritime air patrol. With seaplanes. Seaplanes are new in this game, right? Seaplanes can go 2 spaces on maritime air patrol. So they can go here on cap, or they could go here on cap. They could go 2 spaces and go anywhere. One thing I should have mentioned too, that I said you could stay out there. Like if this sub was sitting here, I could go on maritime air patrol and take that guy out. So 1, 2, because I've got a range of 2, put him on maritime air patrol, and then bring in a destroyer. Okay, so there I go. Now I go and do all my other combat moves and everything, and then I come back and I resolve combat on this, right? So there's that one, but there's also if you have the long range aircraft technology, then medium bombers and medium bombers only can go 2 spaces. So 1, 2 on maritime air patrol. And again, like you would get to go 2 spaces back, and if you were further than 2 spaces away from a landing spot, then you would be eliminated, right? But anyways, like this, I could go on maritime air patrol with the sea zone empty, just so Germany can't go through there, or I could go on maritime air patrol to go and get a submarine. So either that's 2 ways of doing it, and those are the only 2 instances where you can go 2 spaces, and that's this guy with the long range aircraft, and this guy normally goes 2, and you'll see how effective that is later. Now let's talk about combat moving submarines. So I've got a submarine over here, and if I wasn't at war with Britain, then I could just go wherever I wanted, right? I don't have any restrictions. Or if I wasn't at war with anybody, I could just go right through there. But with subs, because you do need planes on maritime air patrol to see them, you could go through them as well. So even when you are at war, so here's 1, 2 right through there, 3, 4, and then I could go convoy the line over there if I wanted to. Same thing with going through these guys over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went right through that destroyer. So I could do that as well. I could just go through like they're not even there. On the other hand, if I did happen to have, say, a carrier in here, then I couldn't go through there, because a carrier-based aircraft is on maritime air patrol, right? So 1, 2, then I would have to let this guy have a shot at me if I want to keep going. Like I would tell him that I was either attacking these guys or that I was planning on moving through, and so he knows that, okay, and then when all the German combat movement is done, then you resolve this one. So this guy would take a shot at 6. If he misses, then this guy could keep moving, right? There's that one, but there's also like if you had your plane on combat air patrol, like let's say you were in this zone here on maritime air patrol, and we started that sub back over here, so you'd go 1, and then you would have to resolve it here, because this guy, that's why you would leave them on maritime air patrol. You know, if you were wondering, why would I just leave the plane out there? Well, you would leave them there in this instance so that you could keep that sub from going through there. So 1, he would have to resolve that first. 2, there's another one, you'd have to resolve that. 3, 4. You know, like you could get there, but you'd have to run the gauntlet first, right? In order to get there. So that's combat moving subs. You just you don't have to worry about anything unless there's a plane on maritime air patrol. If he's not, then you don't have to worry about it. Like if this plane was here and he was not yet on maritime air patrol, I can't say, wait a minute, I'm going to scramble in there onto maritime air patrol and go and attack that. You couldn't do that, okay? You would have to be there already when he was going to go moving through there. So there's that. So there's one last thing that happens during the movement phase when it comes to convoy riding, and that is moving your escorts. You can put your escorts anywhere you want along any of the convoy raiding lines, right? So like here, you might want to put a guy on escort duty here. And you could put any kind of boat you want on escort duty. Let's just grab a few of these chips here, and I'll show you what I mean. It's difficult to cover all your lines though, I tell you. cover them everywhere. So, like, you could put any kind of boat you want on there. You could put cruisers on there. You could put battleships. You could put anything, right? But that guy, he can't go and conduct combat now. Like, that's your combat move, and his choice for combat is to guard the line like that. So on your non-combat move, you could decide to take him off of escort duty like this. Okay, now I'm off escort duty with that destroyer. But until you do that, like, you can't move him again, right? Well, when he's on this yellow chip here, you can't move him. He's there. He can defend himself. Like, you could leave him there until the next round. You could leave him like that for 10 rounds if you want. So anybody that came into that sea zone to either do a convoying, like this sub here, or even a whole force moved in there, he can defend himself. He could defend himself if he was on convoy duty here, defend himself with the rest of them, or he could ignore the combat that's going on. Like, a bunch of combats going on against these boats here, he could say, you know what, I don't want to take part in that, which is kind of chicken shit. But you know, I don't see that happening with a destroyer. But maybe you have a battleship you don't want to lose, right? Who's on escort duty. So anyway, let's get to convoy raiding next. So we talked a little bit about hunting subs with Maritime Air Patrol. Now let's talk about the subs being the hunters. This is what convoy raiding is all about. So here's a sub, and here's a convoy line. You look at here, this convoy line is worth 3 IPP. So the maximum damage you could do to this line, and the whole length of that line too, like, it goes all the way over to here, and all the way up to here. That's that whole line there. So you could raid in any zone on that convoy line for a maximum of 3. You could do it with any number of submarines, or as you'll see in a minute, you can do it with other things as well. So let's raid with that. You can move as far as you possibly can to go raid something. Like, you could stay in a space and say, I'm going to convoy this, or you could move 3 spaces with a sub, or 4 if you were at a sub base or a major naval base of some kind. So let's say you moved a couple of spaces and you've decided to convoy here. Now this guy has got an escort, and so he's right here, right? Like, if there was an escort here, you probably wouldn't stop there, would you? You'd say, okay, I'm going to raid the line right here, you know. So it's pretty easy to get around that, right? Like, you wouldn't move your sub down here and do it where there's an escort. But let's say the escort's here. So this escort's not going to have anything to do with it, because he has to be in the zone where the sub was. The rules in version 2 said that if there was a boat that was on escort duty anywhere on that convoy line, then he would be involved in the convoy raiding. And so it really wasn't very fair to the submarines. It was too easy to kill submarines, because once the sub had finished, then the raider got to roll. In this case, the destroyer, he defends at 4, so he would roll a 4 or less. You were killing too many subs. It just wasn't, you weren't taking out enough money to justify going convoy raiding, right? But now you are, because they have to hunt you down, right? So let's say you go there, and what you do, let's just grab some dice here. There we go. Okay, so what you do is you say, I'm going to convoy this, and that's why we have these chips here, so that you would know that, right? I wonder if I put this here. No, you can't really see it there either. Let's just move it like this. Okay, so what you do is you each roll a 6-sided die, not 12-sided. Most of the game is played with 12-sided, but with convoy raiding, you'll use 6-sided die. And there's modifiers with those. So here, let me just go to the modifiers here. So you get +2 for a submarine. If you had an advanced submarine, like if you were going with this sub here instead, then that would be +4. You would add that to your dice. If this guy was in here, the escort, then the escort would be +1. So that's another reason for you not to want to escort or convoy raid where there's an escort. So let's just say it's like this. So +2 to the sub. We'll say that the black die goes to the Germans and the white die goes to the British on the convoy line there. So we roll the dice. So the Germans got 1 + 2, right? So that's 3, and the British got 6. So nothing happens. The convoy attempt wasn't successful. It doesn't matter that it's -3. So you could, like you try again here. What do we get? So this time we got 5 and 3. So this is 5 + 2 is 7 against 3. So that's +4. Now you can only do a maximum of 3. So you have these handy dandy little markers here. There you go. There's 2, 3. The reason you would mark that convoy line is so that you don't convoy it again. Like say if you only hit it for 2, then you could convoy it again, like with the Japanese or with the Italians, right? They could come with a sub on the same line somewhere and convoy it and try to get another point off. They probably wouldn't though if there was only one to get. But some of these convoy lines are worth 6 or something, right? Like the one in the Mediterranean there is worth 6. So let's say you only got it for 3 there on this Mediterranean line. You would mark that one with 3. And then this guy decides he wants to convoy it as well. He can't get more than 3 off there because you've already taken 3 off. And that's per turn, right? And then once the British turn comes around again, then these come off and you start over again, right? Or sorry, once you've gone around a full turn. So back to the German turn, that's when they would come off because it was the Germans that originally had taken that off, right? It's like that for a full round of like a full 6 months in gameplay, basically. Anyway, so that is the basics of how to convoy raid. But you don't have to just use. Hang on a second. You don't have to just use subs though. Like subs are the most common one, and they're the ones that you get the +2 for. But you can also do other kinds, and I'll get to that in 1 second here. I'll just set them up. Okay, so these are going to be a couple of optional rules that I'm talking about. Most of the convoying, of course, is done with just a regular sub here, right? But an optional rule is that you can convoy raid with any ship that goes 3 or more spaces, right? No, that's not with using the naval base, right? So there's a fast battleship. It goes 3. Destroyers go 3. Cruisers of all kinds go 3. I didn't put a light cruiser in here. I guess I should have. Oh, there it is. No, it isn't. I forgot to grab light cruiser. Anyway, light cruiser would be fine as well. There's a battle cruiser, heavy cruiser, advanced submarine. So all of these things here you could raid a convoy line with, but you can't raid a convoy line with a surface ship. You could with a sub, but not with a surface ship if you had an escort in the same zone. Like the escort would be able to see you. A sub can get away with it because he gets a shot and then then the destroyer chases him down, right? But you wouldn't even be able to do it. You can't even attempt it if there's any kind of ship that's on escort duty. Like if he was beside here, then sure, you could raid the escort line over here with one of those ships if you moved him onto convoy there. So like that guy could do it. And it's a 0 modifier. It's just the sub there that gets +2. The advanced sub gets +4. There's also there's the little subs there, the coastal subs. They get a +1 raider modifier. Also, another optional rule is you could lay mines with these things here, whether it's a seaplane or a heavy cruiser or a submarine. You could do raiding. And the reason that you would do that is that there's no defense against it. So like they wouldn't be able to. Um, Hang on a second. Let me just check on that rule. I know what I'm thinking. I just got to see how to say it there. Yeah, sorry about that. My brain was thinking about four different things there. So yeah, these guys can instead of having their pluses that they would get for convoy rating, you could instead of say, okay, I'm going to lay a mine instead, and you wouldn't actually use a mine. I happen to have one, but you would just say, okay, I'm going to convoy this, but I'm going to do a mine rating convoy. So it's not as effective. What it is it's just it's at zero instead of the plus, and then there's no the escorts can't stop you, and neither can a plane on maritime air patrol. So you could lay a mine right under their nose it's and get away with it basically. Okay, so if you were getting low on subs, that might be what you want to do, right? Is try that, and also like if it's a smaller convoy line, like this one's only worth 3. If you're going at one worth 6, then yeah, you might consider getting the +2 because you can take more money off them. But this one, not really though. So there is one more thing here, and that's another optional rule, and that's convoy rating with aircraft. So a tactical bomber, a medium bomber, and a seaplane can also convoy rate, but only when they're on maritime air patrol. Like in other words, they would have only had to been able to go one space, right? Or with a seaplane, it would be 2 spaces onto that convoy line and rate it like that. So, it's not that easy to do, right? It's not like you can just fly your planes around and attack convoy lines and leave, right? You're limited in your range on how to do that. It's and the procedure's identical, like where you're rolling the dice and everything. Um, and the escorts will get to fire back. So if there's escorts in there, then they will get to fire back at you when you're convoy rating with aircraft. Sorry, I'm trying to read all this and look at it at the same time because these are new rules. I had the convoy rules down, but I haven't really used planes too much and surface ships too much. That's something that, like you can throw into your game right away first time you play it, or you could say, you know what, I'm just going to try to get these convoy rules down. Then that's what I've been doing, right? And just, convoy raid with subs and then, okay, am I ready now? Am I getting the hang of this? And then you can add the other things in. Like what I do is I've added the mine laying in because that's pretty easy, right? It's just a couple of things that you can do that with. And then, like eventually I'm going to put in the surface ships and the airplane rating as well. But you can start off small if you want. Like that's why they made some of those optional rules. But the sub ratings, that's not optional. That's something that is part of the game. Okay, so there's just a couple more things I want to mention, and then we'll get to the strategy part. And right now we'll just talk about disrupted. So if like there's convoy lines that just go from C zone to C zone. The one that we were just rating there, that one I showed you, it started in one C zone and ended in another C zone, and then it was another convoy line that would start from there. There are lines though that go from territory to territory. So like this one here, this one goes from Italy down to Africa in a place that Africa owns. But let's say the British came and took this out. So now there's no reason to be sending supplies up to Italy from Africa anymore, right? Because they don't own that. So you would put this along that convoy line. It says disrupted on it. And what that means is that you can't raid that line anymore. So, don't bother with your subs because you're not getting that dollar off there. There's no point in convoy, and you'll find that there's other places. Like there's a convoy line that goes from the Philippines over to the western states there. If the Japanese take out the Philippines, then you can't convoy raid that line because they're not getting supplies from the Philippines or giving them to the Philippines anymore. They don't have that territory, so there's no reason for them to be shipping supplies along that line. And I think there's one from Japan to one of the Dutch East Indies anyway. And anyway, anytime one of the territories is taken out or both of them, that convoy line is disrupted. So let's talk about technology a little bit. I already told you about long range aircraft and how that could make a medium bomber go on maritime air patrol 2 spaces instead of 1. So that's one thing. Another thing is radar. Radar will give your escorts a +2 modifier when you do that opposing D6 rolls instead of +1. But like I said, though, you're probably not going against an escort anyway. You know, with all these lines and everything, why would you choose a spot where there was an escort, right? But anyway, I mean that's part of radar anyway. Is that escort would be +2 instead of +1. Then there's also the advanced submarines, and I showed you one of those. This German one here, right? So that guy there, he's +4 on his modifier. Now the thing about those though, they attack it for and defend it for. They're almost impossible to kill. Like you basically have to get them while you're on the attack. Like the British would have to be on the it'd be the British turn, and they would have to go and attack that guy, and they could only attack him with a plane. You know, here's the carrier-based aircraft on maritime air patrol. You could not pair him with a destroyer against that advanced sub. All you get is the plane. That's it. And so if the plane misses, the sub dives. So it's really tough to get those advanced subs. So if you're a German, I tell you, that's a pretty good one to have. But I mean, there's a lot of things that help the Germans though too, right? I mean, heavy armor, like just about anything on the ground is going to help them. A lot of technologies would help the Germans, but that one would be a much better one than say heavy carriers for the Germans, right? Because the Germans don't stray that far from home, really, when you're talking about going across an ocean. So a heavy carrier wouldn't be nearly as useful as an advanced submarine. And the last one is the advanced submarine warfare. That's what I put this chip down there for. So if somebody was going to raid your convoy line, you could put that down, say, hey, don't forget I got advanced submarine warfare. So that does a few things. First of all, your escorting ships would gain that +1, so they would be at +2 on their opposing D6 roll there. Again, you're probably not going to have too many escorts shooting though. But also, anytime a sub makes a raiding roll on a convoy, just the line itself gets a roll at 2. So just you could just say that the ships that are in there have the ability to defend themselves, and they do it at a 2. Like there doesn't even have to be a ship on that convoy line. If you have advanced submarine warfare, then after the convoying is done, like after the opposing D6 rolls, that's when you would say, okay, now I get to shoot back, and you roll a D12, not a D6. You roll a D12 and you try to get a 2 or less, so a 1 or 2, and if you do, then the sub is sunk. And the last thing is in regular combat, naval transports defend at a 1, allocating any hit to attacking submarines. And I did contact my friend who makes the rules to this game, Morton, and he tells me yes, it's only subs. You might as well not even bother rolling if there's no subs in there. Like you could have a big attack with a bunch of boats on both sides. If the attacker doesn't have any subs, then there's no point in even rolling for the transports because they can't hit anything. And so you should think about that. If a guy's got like 4 or 5 transports in his own and you've got a bunch of stuff, including a sub, after that first round of combat, lose the sub, right? Because then he doesn't get those 5 rolls at 1. But it's up to you, right? Like take a look at the odds and everything. Take a look at which way you should be rolling it, right? Who knows? It just depends, right, on what's in there and how you're rolling, right? Anyway, that's how technology would affect it. So let's go and check out some strategy here. Let's talk about Germany first. The Hunters. As you can see here, they start with 1 sub that's in this zone. Let me just get my chopstick there. They start with one sub and one coastal sub. They also start with one sub in the place units box over on the build chart. So that's all you start with. But I mean, you got to remember, you're only in 1936. Everybody's at a limited amount of money. Germany, not as much so as everybody else, but Germany also needs to build a lot of units for that initial strike, that one where they take out Paris and and try to take out Russia as well, or Poland. So they need to go two directions. So they're going to need a lot of that money, but at the same time, it's early in the war, in the pre-war, that you really want to set up your submarine warfare as well. Now you can't raid anybody's convoy while you're at peace, right? That would be an act of war. You would be declaring war on the British to hit a convoy line on, say, 1937 or something, right? So that's not something that you want to do. You'll want to wait until you're ready to attack either Paris or Russia, I guess, and draw Britain into the war. But you definitely don't want to be raiding before that. But the thing is, like, you see the amount of British ships up here, and that'll change. Like, there'll either be more or less around here by the time the war breaks out. What you want to do is you want to get by these ships first. It depends. Like, you can watch the guy if he's not paying any attention to the submarine warfare. I'm talking about the British player here, the Commonwealth player. If they're not paying any attention to the Atlantic, then you've got more time. But if they're starting to build planes and escort carriers and stuff early in the game, then you're going to want to get on buying some submarines. If you're playing with the Canada at War expansion, then you're going to get 4 free submarines. They'll start on the build chart. There'll be one at space 1, I think 1 at space 2 and 2 at space 3. So you won't pay for those. They'll like you'll put 1 on, then the next turn you'll put 1 on, then the next turn you'll put 2 on, right? So that's 4 right there, and then you've got the one that's already on, that's 5. A couple more and you should be fine. But if you're not playing with the Canada War expansion, then you're going to need to buy a few. And like, that's up to you though, right? I mean, I'm talking about if you want to be effective in the Battle of the Atlantic. I would say probably 6 or 7 subs would be good. And then, like, I'm not going to tell you that you should try for the technology or not the sub technology. I mean, like, it definitely would help you, right? There's no doubt about it that it would help you do that. But there's also other technologies, so it's up to you. Like, there's 3 major things that the Germans can accomplish in this game, but probably you would want to try for 2 of them. So one is taking out the French, right? Another is taking out the Russians, and another is the Battle of the Atlantic. Those are the 3 major things that Germany does. As far as taking out Europe, I mean, they get that automatically, right? So those are the 3 major things that they do in the game. You can probably, if you just concentrate on 2 of them, you can probably get them no problem. If you try for 3, then you're going to need a bit of luck, a bit of good rolling and stuff, or some very, very good play. Like, you have to be a good player. So it just depends on what you want to put into this stock, into the Battle of the Atlantic, like how much resources you want to put in. I would put in at least 5 subs, but I think that you're probably better off going with more. Now, you're going to want to get them out there before, like I said, because once you're at war, it's going to be hard. And I'm going to show you what I would do as the British player and what I do as the Commonwealth player all the time now. By the time they go to war, then I've got this just about sealed up, so you can't get any more subs by. You better get your subs out early, right? So you get your subs out, and let's walk down there. You get them out, and you get them down so that you've got lots of room out here to convoy raid, right? Like, you probably won't be able to raid that line up there it depends, like, if the British player isn't on the ball, then you can raid it. But there's that line up there. There's all these lines, all around here. You could raid in the Indian Ocean. You could raid convoy lines in the Mediterranean there. But just get out into the open waters, right? You don't want to get bogged down You don't want to get stuck in the Baltic Sea there and buying submarines when you're already at war, because then you're going to have a tough time getting by that Royal Navy. Get them out as quickly as you can, and then, you know, like, you're going to want to build your tanks and everything for your ground assault. But make sure that you get out as many boats as you want before that happens. Otherwise, you might not be able to get them out. But you'll see that. You'll see what kind of plan that the British player is doing. So that's them. Now, that's the easy part. The Germans have got the easy part, and there's not much on the German reference sheet here that tells you anything about convoy rating or anything. Like there's nothing much that helps you, is what I mean to say. Not like for the Allies. So for the Allies here, let's just take a look here. So the USA, there's a couple of things on the USA chart here. The USA can start. Where are we? It may perform escort duty on convoy lines in the Atlantic Ocean once they are at the threshold of that 35 IPP right there. At 15 IPP, they can lend lease to nations at war with a major power. So that's a big deal, because that they can help you out with. It costs a lot of money and resources to do this over here, right? We're not talking about buying a couple of dudes or a couple of militia. We're talking about buying boats here, and that costs, boats and planes, and that costs a lot of money, right? So that would really help out with the Americans there. What do we got for the British here? I can't remember what it said there, but basically, with the Canada rules, they have this thing called the Aerodrome of Democracy. So you can build planes in Canada for 5 IPP cheaper if you play with the Canada expansion, and if Canada decides to build that. So that's something that'll help you out there. But being able to buy things for 2 IPP cheaper, like any kind of plane, right? Could be your fighter, it could be a seaplane, could be anything. And seaplanes, don't forget about seaplanes. So we're talking about the British now. Here, I'm going to just set something up. I want to show you something, okay? Okay, so I've set up some British defense here using escort carriers and a couple of seaplanes in the North Atlantic here. Now, where you see these pies here, the British pies, is where I could possibly hit a sub if it were to stop anywhere. So basically anywhere in the North Atlantic up here, other than over here, this spot I can't reach, and like down here I could reach. So everywhere here I can reach. Now what I'm using here is these are supposed to be seaplanes, right? But don't have enough seaplane scalps. But I talked to Doug yesterday. Said, Doug, I'm doing a video tomorrow. When do we got some seaplanes coming? Anyway, like there's just no way of knowing when that plastic's going to come in from China, right? So like he's been doing lots of 3D printed pieces on there. He's going to put out some 3D printed seaplanes. Now I know that doesn't help you guys that don't like to do any painting. If you're not going to do any painting, then you know, like they're all going to be the same color. So you know, maybe that's not a great thing for you. But you can always wait for the plastic to come. But if you do have a few dollars, so then he's going to be putting them on. I imagine it'll be 5 at a time kind of thing. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing, because that's how he does everything else, is 5 at a time, right? So hopefully you'll see those out this week. He was going to get on that tomorrow. But anyway, you can see what I've done here. Like what I've done is I've covered this line here. Now remember destroyers as well, right? You're going to want destroyers in there. Let's put this destroyer over here. Like I wouldn't have these boats over here, right? I would have moved these things by now. So I would like, you could just put them like this. And then these ones, let's take these ones down over here eventually, kind of thing. Okay, so now like you look at that, and that's all covered up here. There's no way, this is why you're going to want to get your subs past me before, you know, because all 4 spaces in here have the Maritime Air Patrol, so you can't get through there, and also have destroyers. I would put a destroyer over here as well. Now, that's going to take me some time and it's going to take some money. Remember, you got the Aerodrome of Democracy over there, but that doesn't kick in until Canada's at war. And then they've got to purchase it, right? So there's that. Now, that's just that side of the board. But, like, when you think about it, one of those escort carriers there, if you look at the price of that, here, let me just pull it up here. I'll show you. Well, I guess I don't really need to show you. I can always just tell you. But it's 8 IPP, right? So, looking at it here, light carrier is 4 and 4. That's what I thought. So it costs you 8 IPP, and then so the cheapest thing you can put on there is a fighter. So that's another 8. So, or sort of 10. So that's 18 IPP. It costs you to get a plane on maritime air patrol. Like you could put them on land, but they don't reach very far. But what I'm saying is, why not buy a seaplane for 7 IPP? You could actually get a seaplane base for only 2 IPP. So that's 9 IPP. That's half of what you would pay for an escort carrier with a fighter on it, right? So you get yourself enough seaplanes for the British. And remember that the Americans at 15 IPP, they can start leasing money. So you're wondering, where is all this money going to come from? Well, rather than lending them all for these other big ticket items, why not just lend them a bunch of money and they can buy seaplanes with it, right? Or just send seaplanes. It's up to you as the American player, right? But anyway, look at this. You put one on Gibraltar here. Now, the thing about seaplanes is they're terrible on defense when it comes to land. And the reason that I put seaplane bases on is for only one reason. Like your blue naval base is going to make them go farther already anyway. So you didn't really need the naval base to make your seaplane go further. But the seaplane base itself allows you to scramble into an adjacent territory, or sorry, an adjacent sea zone like this one here. So like if the German U-boats were to attack these two boats here, then this guy here, if he wanted, could scramble into here, right? And then of course you're going to get an extra shot. Like these things, they're not terrible. Like they're only a 3 on attack, 3 on defense, but still, like they'd be cheaper to lose than losing one of these things as well. So you could use that as your cannon fodder when you're scrambling it. Because like if I'm Germany and I've got a bunch of submarines, like I said, get all those submarines by there while you can. Why would you go and convoy a line for 3 when you could take out 2 boats, right? Same thing here. Like I would put some boats down here and a seaplane down here. Like I could put one right on there. There's a complex right there. Again, though, you're going to want to protect it because seaplane itself on the land is not much protection. Like this one here, Gibraltar, that I was showing you there. That makes Gibraltar an even juicier target than normal. Like for the Italians to build a couple of transports and go and take that. So I would not put a seaplane on there and a base unless you were planning on also stocking it up with infantry and stuff. So down here, for the same price, I put 3 infantry, a seaplane, and a seaplane base. And that seaplane base can scramble out and cover these guys. Now that seaplane here can go 1, 2. I didn't even put pies over here. You could have covered these spaces here. Even though they're not lines, that's still places that subs could hide, right? Again, you could go in 1. Oh, that one should be here. So 1, and then 2. This one spot here and one spot here. Those are the only 2 places on the board that I can find that aren't covered. Because look, here's another one here. This is just a regular fighter. I would want to put a regular fighter there anyway, right? So that guy can cover this zone. But your seaplane here can cover this zone and this zone. You put a seaplane over here, it can cover this zone, this zone, this zone, this zone, and this zone. You could even, if you wanted to, put a seaplane in Calcutta eventually, and then you would have everything covered, right? Like you can cover this and this territory here, and this one down here even. I forgot about that one. This one here. So there wouldn't be much places for the Japanese to hide either, because then you've got this guy over here, like you look at here, this is a perfect place for a seaplane right here, right? Like he can go 1, 2. So here, here, here. Oops. Should can that thing. So he could go here, he could go here, he could go here. 1, 2 over to here, up to here, here. Like you could, with just this many seaplanes, you could cover the entire board. Again, though, not good on defense, so you're going to want to put a couple of infantry there, right? Otherwise, it's just basically an auto kill. You go in there with 1 infantry on a transport, and you can kill that guy, right? But it would be cheaper to do it that way. So that's one way. Like I was wondering, how the hell am I ever going to cover the Atlantic with the loss of escorts, right? Well, look at, there's only 2 spots here. There's a couple places I could land a seaplane here. Like I don't think I would buy any more than that. I think, you know, like you could once Germany had sent all their subs down and there wasn't any more coming, you could send 1 or 2 of those things down there, right? And you could start hunting them. I'm talking about the carriers and destroyers, right? And I would bring something with them too, some kind of deterrent as well, like some kind of cruiser, maybe, or 2, just so the subs don't turn around and attack the boats instead, right? Anyway, just make sure that you're protecting your boats. Like this one, if there was 4 subs, I'd go after that. But that's one way that you can kill subs, right? Like if your goal is to kill subs, then you could do it on defense just as well as you could do it on offense, right? So that helps you out too. He might be killing you, but you're also killing him. And then eventually, once all the subs are gone, then they're gone, right? Now you can move on to the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about protecting the Atlantic much anymore because they can't get any subs by that up there. So that's one thing that I would do. It takes a bit of money and everything, but I tell you though, it can be a lot worse for you because you add up the money there. There's 6, there's 12, there's 18, there's 21. I'm just looking at the convoy lines. Like if Germany was on the ball, they could take probably 12 to 15 IPP off you every turn. That's half your income. So if they're taking that off, where are you going to get money to buy units, right? You're not, is the simple answer. The Americans will just be pouring money into you, and then they're not building their own units, right? Like it's okay to pour some money into you when they're not at war, just to help you out, to get you this defense, because it's going to cost some money to do that. You start with one escort carrier on over here. So that's one, and there's that'll help out too, a light cruiser. But you're still going to need to buy a couple more. And Canada, if you're playing with Canada, I'd put one in for them as well. Again, remember that Aerodrome of Democracy, so that they can do that. I like to play with escort carriers, as these guys down here. Like I lend lease them from the United States. Like I'll build the carrier down here for 4 and then 4, and send a plane down from the States or from Canada if you want to get it a little bit cheaper, right? Anyway, so it can be really, really interesting, this Battle of the Atlantic. This is ideally what I'd like to do. Of course, the best laid plans can get thrown into the muck as well, right? Don't forget about it though. Like don't just slough it off saying, oh, you know, it's kind of complicated to do that kind of stuff. I think I'll just stick with tanks and stuff. That's what I was doing. And, you know, like you can't be as effective as you want to be as the German player if the British player is strong. You can severely weaken the British player by convoying them relentlessly. So keep trying to do that as much as possible until the Americans get in the war. Once they get a huge navy over there, start moving across, you're as good as dead, right? Because there's just way too many planes in the water at that point for you to be that effective. So at that point, you probably want to just give it up. But the game's almost over by then anyway. There's only like 3 or 4 turns left, right? And by then, you're just looking at where your points are. Where can I get my points? But don't forget about that Battle of the Atlantic. It's a really exciting part of the game. Just get good at it. Like I've showed you what I've been doing, but you can try what you were doing. I asked Morton if he had any advice. He says, I'm not telling you. You'll put it on YouTube. He says he likes to show people, you know, how to do it. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to get him to show me his tips. Anyway, he wasn't going to do it, and I understand. Like I was the British player down in Tulsa. He was the German player, and between him and Delija, when Delija took the Dutch islands on me, and then he convoyed the living shit out of me in the Atlantic. There was nothing I could do. But I'm a better player now for it, that's for sure. Anyway, that's about all I got for you today, everyone. So hopefully we get some seaplanes this week. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.